I'm a singer-songwriter, but I wasn't about 15 months ago. I was a guy that owned a marketing firm in Canada, and a very circuitous journey getting there. I, worked in television, radios, kind of a media producer, kind of all things media. Started this PR company called Gray Smoke Media about a decade ago. And along the way, I was kind of vigorously searching for my reason on earth. I wrote a newspaper column. I was on television. I had a really successful podcast with my friend called Shame on You, where we interviewed all our exes and one night stands. You can imagine that alone description. You can see why it did well. Weirdly enough, only one of them said no to come on. I think people like to get their voices out, and we sold out shows and everything, but I kept searching over and over for my reason on earth. And I'd done all these things. I tried a million things, and I had fun. It wasn't that I wasn't having fun, but there was this empty hole inside of me. And I would say a year and a half ago, I was quite sick. I had a disease called ulcerative colitis for 18 years of my life. And I went to a doctor, and he said, listen, your disease is at the end stages. We're going to cut out 13 inches of your colon, and you're going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of your life. And that was the first time I sort of heard some sort of higher power or voice talking to me. And I just heard it saying, no, this isn't in the plan. So I communicated those exact words to the doctor, who looked at me like, oh yeah, I've heard this before. And I went home, and I went through this period where I got all the chemicals out of my house. I changed the way I ate. But largely, I got involved in consciousness work, some of the work of Joe Dispenza, people like that. And I changed my state of being, state of awareness, which is sort of a 5D consciousness take, to a person that was healed, was no longer sick. I did not talk like I was sick. I did not tell people I was sick. I walked around like I wasn't sick. And eventually, 60 days later, the disease that had plagued me for my whole life actually went away. And then my dog passed away, and I ended up going on a 6-month journey to Asia, jumping around to Thailand and all these different places. And I was kind of just finding myself and trying to find my purpose still. And I went to Bali, like you mentioned, and a friend of mine said, let's go to Ubud. And I met this woman at a tent, and I walked in completely unconscious, closed-minded, a natural aversion to spirituality because I had kind of merged it with religion, and I'm a gay guy. And so I just kind of thought, oh, all those people don't approve of me, so let me just not even get involved in that. And not that I would say nihilistic, but I sort of was just, I didn't believe in anything. I wasn't, didn't cleave to anything. And I met this woman, and I walked in, and I just felt this energy off of her. Like, she just sort of knew me, and almost like a deja vu old friend feeling. And she sat me down, and she said, oh, you're here about the music. And I said, what music? And she said, oh, you were a musician in a past life. You've killed yourself. But now that you've gone through this whole journey of sort of understanding who you are and enough pain that you can do this and find the reason why you're doing this, it's now time for you to go be a famous musician. And I'm thinking, like, is she on drugs? Like, I still was just staring at her, but something in my heart was like, no, listen, Jordan, just listen to her. And I spent about a week doing some of the wackiest stuff you can imagine, talking to my 7-year-old self, herbs and burning sage and dancing and all these different sound healing modalities. And at the end of that week, it was like someone cracked my brain open. And it wasn't so much of, learning about spirituality. It was almost remembering who I was and where I came from and where we all come from. And I remember reading on the plane. I was just, I'm a huge nerd. So I was just reading all the books on the plane, learning about frequency, energy, all this stuff. I'd done psychedelics before, but it was just to get high with my friends. And I came back to Canada, and I told my mom, I said, okay, I think I'm ready to make an album. My mom was like, what? And I said, I'm ready to make an album. I'm a musician now. And no one really people just thought I was like having a midlife crisis or something. I don't know. And I ended up making my first album in 2.5 weeks. First month, 400 listeners. And since then, my music has been streamed almost 5 million times.